Good morning. I don't think it's afternoon anywhere, but welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar is entitled Collaboration Can Be Dangerous Business. You have two of us on the webinar for a little bit. The first person is Michael Pay, who's our Chief Technology Officer at Concept Searching. And Mike, would you like to give a brief intro to yourself and your history?
Absolutely. So I've been with Concept Searching for about 4 or 5 years now, and I manage our development team out of the UK, predominantly working on all of the SharePoint products that we provide.
Okay. And I'm Carla, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Concept Searching, and I have spent probably the past 20 years concentrating on metadata classification and taxonomy technologies for a bunch of different companies, and I'm responsible for the strategic marketing direction and the tactical oversight of our product suites. What are we going to do today? I'm going to turn it back over to Mike for a little bit, and he's going to talk about who we are and what we do, our technology, and he's going to give a short demo. And the reason we inserted the demo was that you all could see what the technology does, and that's twofold. First of all, to understand what we do, but secondfold, if you're starting to look at collaboration tools, it might also be a good reference point on different features and functions that you might want to say are a must-have in the tool that you're looking at. And then we'll get straight into collaboration. Why is it so popular? And basically what this webinar is talking about is the risk factors as well as some possible solutions, the costs and the takeaways, which again are can be used if you're doing an ROI for a different tool. That would probably help some numbers that would be helpful to all of you. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to tell you who we are and what we do and give you a brief demo.
Thank you, Carla. Okay, so for those of you that perhaps don't know who we are, we've been around for around 12, 14 years now, and we're mainly focused on metadata generation, auto-classification and management, with many of the world's largest corporations depending on our platform. So our platform is our software is platform agnostic, and it's not a SharePoint only platform. However, much of the content of our webinar series does use SharePoint as the main focus. And the reason for this is we do integrate with SharePoint in a very strong fashion, and we integrate with all versions of SharePoint from SharePoint 2007 onward, with full product support in the form of both a farm solution and a provider-hosted add-in. And we're also the only solution in the market with a fully integrated statistical multi-term auto-classification engine delivering metadata-driven search and governance solutions. So as a platform, we focus on 3 key areas: metadata generation, auto-classification and taxonomy management. And we provide all of this functionality with native support for SharePoint infrastructure. However, the flexibility of our product is such that we can be used to categorize and analyze content in other content repositories such as file shares, databases and websites, as well as other repositories that are coming soon such as Content Server, Exchange and Box. So what our engine can be used to do is generate semantic metadata to deliver enhancements to search and migration, as well as a number of other aspects of business day-to-day life. And it allows us to limit end-user tagging unless the user specifically wants to override the tagging that we've applied. So our key differentiator, which still keeps us unique within the industry, is our core search index, which utilizes compound term processing. So a traditional search engine assumes that the end user knows what they're looking for, or more specifically, must enter a very specific combination of words to receive back the data that they're looking for. And what this really means is that end users need to try and identify the context of the content that they're seeking. And really the fundamental problem with this is that the most queries that we write are just simply short patterns of words and not single words in isolation, which can be potentially quite ambiguous. And with single word search engines, what you tend to find is that the results that are returned, while you may get quite a lot of recall, you don't get much precision. So the example that we've got on the slide here is for the search triple heart bypass. Now, in a typical search engine, the phrase can be fairly highly ambiguous, potentially returning documents about road networks or baseball. But with compound term processing, what we can do is identify the concept itself of those three words and use the whole search to improve the precision of our search results. So not only can we return the words that are, the documents that contain triple heart bypass as a phrase, but we also then know perhaps other information and other concepts that are related to triple heart bypass so that we can return documents that perhaps don't contain any of those words, but are far more relevant than just words or documents, that contain just the word bypass. So what does this allow us to do? It's a very non-disruptive technology, and our core technology can be used in many different ways. More commonly, we're used for auto-classification and tagging within the source system, but we can also be used for the identification of content, and this can be used for a multitude of reasons, such as records management, search for faceted analysis, migration, as well as a number of other types of data analysis activities, such as e-discovery or text analytics. So with every company that we work with, we're used in very, very different ways, but the underlying technology is always looking at our compound term processing and auto-classification. So what we'll move on to now is the demo to go through exactly what our technology does and how it works from an end user perspective, and what the benefits are of having auto-classification within an industry. So what we'll first look at is the kind of tools that are available for the subject matter experts when building up the taxonomies that are going to be used for auto-classification. So we're going to start off with a really simple demo. We've got here a term called financial, which at the moment has no documents associated with it and has absolutely no way of knowing which documents should be associated with it. Now, the interface itself looks fairly complicated at first, but actually is fairly simple. So what we're going to do first of all is do a search using the inbuilt search engine within concept searching. So I'm going to search for annual report. So I'm looking for documents that contain the phrase annual report and hoping that those, some of those at least, will be related to the term financial. And what we can see if I scroll through, I've got an annual report and financial statement, so that's relatively relevant. I've got an Apple annual report, as well as a number of others. But what I'm actually going to do for now, I'm just going to select all of the documents on that page. Now in a simple search engine, what we'd be doing is looking for just the phrase annual report. But what we're doing with concept searching is saying we want to find all of the content that relates to annual report. So I'm going to do something called suggest clues within concept searching. And what this functionality does is leverages the inbuilt search engine to do a reverse statistical analysis and pull out the most statistically relevant words and compound terms within those documents so that we can pull together a set of concepts that can be used to tag a document as this particular term. So as we scroll through, we're likely to perhaps see some that aren't particularly relevant or perhaps could give us erroneous data. So while the phrase or word is very repeated throughout all of the document, it could come across in lots of other documents. So that's why the process isn't 100% automated, and it's useful to have the subject matter expert to separate out the terms that are perhaps less useful. So as we go through, dollar, for example, isn't a particularly relevant one. But if we look, we can see some fairly useful ones here. We've got financial statements, we've got company financial, we have operating expenses, credit risk, investment activities, corporate governance, consolidated financial. So a number of different terms that we would definitely expect to see in a financial document. And not only a financial document, actually the documents that we search for, which are annual reports. So if we click Add Selected, what that's going to do is add those as clues. So clues effectively are what we are using to define when a document is about a particular subject area. And the way we do that is associate a score with each particular clue. What we're looking to achieve is associate a burden of proof with each classification as to whether it should be applied to the document. So the higher the score that we associate with a clue, the lower the burden of proof is for that clue to associate it with the document. So essentially what we're saying is the words and phrases that are most specifically about a subject would have a higher score, and the words that are perhaps more ambiguous would have the lower score. And this gives us the ability to use a wide variety of language in a completely language agnostic way to an extent, because it could be French, it could be Spanish, it could be German or English. But we can do it in a very statistical fashion to identify when a document is about that subject. So what we'll do now is go back to the search that we had before of annual report. And we're going to look at some of the other technology that concept searching provides to help you build up those clues as a subject matter expert. So now that we've added the rules in that we might use to tag a document, as an end user, I want to know exactly whether a document in my corpus is going to be tagged as this particular classification so that I can test for false positives and false negatives, i.e. the documents that we want to be tagged but aren't being tagged, and the documents that aren't being tagged that I do want to be tagged. So I've got two ways I can do this. The first way is I can click the calculations link. And what this does is gives me an overview of the classifications that have occurred. And we can see, because obviously we've selected these clues very quickly, we've got quite a high score and quite a high burden of proof. And these are the documents that we use to build our clues. So we would expect them to return quite a high count. We can see a very high score reaching the threshold required for classification and identifying that it is about that subject. But what we can also do is, while that gives us a nice granular approach to being able to look at a specific document and see exactly what it's doing, what we can also do is do a more general approach for the whole search page. By clicking Show Document Movements, we run the whole page through an auto-classification engine, and we look at each document and see what score it's going to achieve, and we compare that to what classification score it achieved before. So none of these documents were previously tagged, as we saw. We've got a number of 0 here on the tree, which identifies that there is no documents associated with it. But as we scroll through, we can see all of these documents will now become scored. And what's more useful is the fact that obviously we can see some documents have a lower score, so we're less confident that they are about that particular subject, and some documents have a higher score, so they're more confident that they're about that particular subject. The important thing to note as well, if we've got a document here or a couple of documents here that actually don't have the correct burden of proof to be about that subject. So what we could then do as a subject matter expert is say, well, actually, I feel this document should be. What score is it achieving and why isn't it being tagged? So at the moment, there are no clues that are actually matching within that particular document. So we could then use that to suggest clues and go through a sort of an iterative process to try and identify the best set of clues for us. And it's by doing this that we can normalize our business language and identify perhaps our documents of record, or perhaps the documents that we want to cherry pick for migration if they're particular knowledge documents, and really streamline the process that we're going through. Obviously though, what we want to then do is see how this can be used for an end user, or more importantly, how it can be used for a business activity. So I'm going to go across now to a pre-built clue that I built earlier. So this is associated with a SharePoint term set, and we've got a number of different clues that are very, very precise and have been built up based on a much larger set of sample content. So we're looking here at around 100, 150 documents we used to build up this set, rather than the 10 that we were working on previously. So again, we've got a lot of clues, and perhaps some of them are quite vague, such as profit and loss, but what we can see is that the scores that they are being associated with are also much lower. And what that means is that we don't need just one particular word or phrase to appear, we need a combination of lots of word or phrases to appear together, which allows us to confirm that it definitely has met the burden of proof to classify it about that particular subject. And what we're also going to do with that is not only tag the document in SharePoint with that particular term if it matches all of these clues or some of these clues. What we're actually going to do is use the workflow component of the concept searching suite to perform an action. So this can be absolutely anything. In this case, what we're doing is saying if the financial reports term is tagged against this particular document, I'd like to change the content type of the document in SharePoint to financial. And after that, we could do any number of other particular actions. We could do entity extraction to put data into fields that are specific to the financial content type that the end user might not build in if they hadn't updated it to that content type automatically. Or we could migrate it to a different location as that content type. And we've also got another workflow which is going to be running at the exact same time on some of the other documents that we'll be uploading, which will identify documents with personally identifiable information. So what we're looking for there perhaps is addresses or social security numbers or Visa card numbers. And based on that, we'll perform a completely different action. So I'm going to go across to SharePoint now. What we have here is a fairly typical SharePoint document library with a number of managed metadata columns. And we can see that tags have been applied throughout the library, all of them automatically by concept searching. So what I'm going to do now is upload a set of content. And that set of content contains a number of different types of documents, some of which I would expect to be tagged as financial reports, and thus we'd expect our workflows to run, changing the content types. And some of them do contain personally identifiable information, so I happen to know that one of these documents contains a Visa card number. So what happens when I drag these into SharePoint is some event receivers are going to fire to the concept searching server. So eventually, once all of these are uploaded, event receivers will fire to concept searching. Concept searching is then going to download all of those documents automatically. It's going to process them through text extraction, pulling out as much metadata from both the SharePoint system as well as the actual document properties themselves as it can, and then it will push them through either iFilters or some other text extraction mechanism to get as much information as we absolutely can to push it through the classification engine. The key thing from an auto-classification point of view is that the more information we have, the more accurate we can be with our auto-classifications. So all of those documents are uploaded now, or more or less uploaded. So effectively what we do is sit in the background processing those, and we would expect those to run within a couple of minutes. So if there is potentially sensitive information, it will be picked up by those background services, and the background services could then perhaps perform some other action if that sensitive information has been uploaded to the wrong location. So a good example in this case is not only the personally identifiable information, because people are less likely to do that, but perhaps financial reporting. So for example, we could identify a document as a financial report, but it's been put into a public repository, which is definitely not where that's supposed to be. So for example, if we have client-facing spaces, and a report goes up that's definitely confidential and supposed to be only for internal consumption, we can perform a multitude of actions to recover ourselves from that situation. Now, whether that's changing the content type to restrict the ability to see it, or whether that's migrating it away, or whether that's as simple as performing an action like sending an email to identify to the person that uploaded it that they may have put this in the wrong location. We can perform all of those on the fly automatically as part of the classification process. So any workflow rule that we want to write can be predicated on any number of classifications. So it can be as complex as we need it to be in terms of saying, well, it's a financial report and it's in this location and it wasn't uploaded by this set of individuals. Therefore, I think this is a sensitive situation. We need to handle it in this manner. So I'm just going to, just bear with me 1 second. So what we're looking to see is over the last couple of minutes, some of those documents should have already been tagged, and I believe it should be coming to the end of processing for the rest of them. So if we refresh the page now, what we'd hope to see is a number of the documents, or all of the documents, should have been processed, and we should see tags have been written to the managed metadata fields, and assuming our workflows have run correctly, the content type should have been changed on those documents. So if we process those all through, so we've got tags written to a number of different documents here. And we can see quite a lot of fairly useful tags. We've got the Apple annual report here, which has tags such as financial reports, business practice and regulation, computers, and all of these tags can be used not only for our workflow actions, but also potentially search, which we'll come on to shortly. So what we'd hope to see if we go to the properties of this particular document, hopefully what we should see is that the content type of the document has been set to financial. Okay, so the document's popped up now. We can see all of the classifications on a more granular basis that were set automatically by concept searching, and we can also see that the content type has indeed been automatically changed to financial. So what this is doing is effectively cherry picking out the documents that we care about and setting them to the correct content type. What we'll do actually, if we go to a higher level view, we should be able to see the content types have been updated for all of the documents that match either the Visa card number matching or the matching of the content type for financial documents. While that's loading though, we'll take a look at the search experience for the end user. So the benefit of adding these tags is not only that we can perform the actions, but also that we can improve the end user experience from the perspective of search. So here I've done a search for the phrase annual report, and SharePoint has given me back quite a lot of documents. It's looking for just the word report, as we can see. It's looking for the word annual. So we can see this is definitely a single word search engine match, particularly on this one here where we can see it doesn't actually contain the word annual, or at least not on its extract, but it does contain the word report on its own. So the benefit of having the classifications that we have is that we can normalize our language and restrict our searches very quickly. So I can say I want only the documents that match meetings, and then immediately at the very top of the search results we can see here annual meeting of the American Psychological Association. So what these refiners allow us to do is very drastically and immediately improve the search results for the end user without actually having to change all that much from an end user experience perspective. If we now pop back to the main test folder, what we will hope to see when we drill down to the test level is the content types will have been set across the document library, and all of the tags will have been written back now as the process is finished in the background. Once that's completed, I'll hand over back to Carla, who will go through some of the business benefits of the technology that we've seen demonstrated here. So what we can see is SharePoint being slow as ever, unfortunately. There we go. So what we can see now is a number of different documents we've uploaded. All of them now have tags, and we can see as we scroll through, this particular document has been associated as financial. These ones haven't, because they're not about financial reporting. And we have our annual reports that we were specifically looking at, all associated as the content type financial. And as we go down, what we can also see is some documents here, as I mentioned, that have also gone through the other workflow, which has identified them with personally identifiable information and changed their content type appropriately. So I think this really demonstrates the power of what auto classification can do from an end user perspective. In just 5 minutes, what we've been able to do is tag all of those documents with a multitude of terms that an end user definitely wouldn't have been able to manually do, or at least it's very unlikely they would manually do it, and if they did, it would take a very large amount of time. What we've also done then is performed a number of actions to improve the business processes. So I hope you found that informative, and I will now pass back over to Carla. Just bear with me one moment.
Okay, hopefully all of you can see my screen. And there were a couple housekeeping items I think I forgot to tell you, but if I did, you're going to have to hear it twice. The recording and the presentation will be mailed to all registered people for the webinar. And also, if you have any questions during the webinar, type them into the chat box and we will be sure to follow up with a response within a day or two. I think Mike's being loud over there. Okay, what is collaboration? I like this definition because there's 3 different definitions for it. The most general and most often used is working together towards a common goal, and usually that's in a group setting. From a knowledge management perspective, it is sharing of information. So an example would be where the goal is most likely an individual and they're looking for someone in the company that has a particular expertise or perhaps authored on a specific subject. And finally, it can be used as conflict resolution strategy. And this term comes up a lot in collaboration, which is something that you don't look forward to, is getting together with your group and fighting it out. And this one I compare to bartering for a car, where the solution is advantageous to all parties, but it's very, very hard to achieve sometimes. And collaboration is a big umbrella. All of these bullets actually represent, I'm not going to read them, all of them actually represent, fall under the collaboration umbrella. So in most organizations, you would have multiple collaboration tools that do different things. These list of software vendors, they were taken from PC Magazine and Gartner as the top collaboration tools. And again, I'm not going to read these, but you can see by the description, some of them are collaboration, some of them are chat, some of them are project management, some of them actually are a full-blown intranet. So there's all different types of tools, and again, you'll probably have more than one. And I have a little piece of trivia for you. Does anybody, well, you can't answer me, but does anybody know what Slack is? So Slack stands for Searchable Log of All Conversations and Knowledge. I didn't know that. Perhaps everybody in the world does, but I don't. So how is your work week spent? This is from an end user perspective. 28% of your time is managing emails. 20% of your time is looking for internal information or for colleagues who can help you out. And according to McKinsey, 35% of your time could be saved with efficient information management. What do you think? This was actually a survey, and it was performed by Google and a research firm called Future Foundation, and they actually interviewed 3,500 employees at Google, which it somewhat makes the answers a little bit surprising. Only 12% of employees are satisfied with current technologies available to them at work. Only 15% of employees are satisfied with the opportunities companies offer them to be innovative. And finally, 46% of employees believe their leaders do not use the technology available to them to the fullest potential. And a good example of that would be the cell phone and texting, which we will talk about a little bit later. If we look at the risk considerations, these are all areas where risk becomes prevalent when you are collaborating. So we'll take a look at some of these. People, think before you write. The average enterprise, this was interesting, collaborates with 72 business partners via OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online. And all business partners obviously are not created equal. And the same thing applies to internal colleagues in different departments. You may not want to or may not be allowed to share certain information with a different group of people. And an example is you may give a social security number to a staffing agency for one of your employees, but you wouldn't give it to a marketing partner. So there is some common sense, which can also lead to errors. It can get kind of tricky. Simply because most often the end user doesn't know if something within the document, the content, or the chat actually is confidential or for internal use only. So the blame, so to speak, always ends up on the knowledge worker. When information isn't vetted for the person it's intended for, the person who communicated the information is at fault, so it doesn't matter. So if I send you an email with an attachment and you forward it to a business partner and it contained confidential information, the fault is essentially yours, not mine. So what's the problem? The problem, of course, and we saw it with Mike in the demo, is finding out what's actually in the document. It's very, very hard to find a software application that will tell you that. If you're talking about an email, there's no easy recall. You can't get it back. And you may have not, you just didn't know, or you're in a position where you need to ask permission to send something, which I call the can I, and we will see a little bit later that verbal communication is pretty much down in the gutter within organizations. So what's the solution? It's estimated that 69% of your content can and should be deleted for compliance and litigation. Identification of sensitive and confidential information should also occur preferably automatically. And when a knowledge worker looks for information, they shouldn't be able to see the confidential information unless they have specific access to it. And if they do have access based on the demo, what it should happen is that it's flagged as confidential, so you don't have to read the entire document to find where the vulnerability is. Security, you store it, you own it, what's the situation? Multiple stakeholders are involved, both internal and external. What's the impact? If you start sharing confidential information, there is the risk of loss of project control, because you don't at some point may not know who has what and if it's confidential or not. Unless your collaboration tool provides it, there's typically no audit trail of who got what. And data breaches, most of them are caused internally. So either on purpose or by accident. So there's also the possibility of a data breach. The other problem, which is becoming a relatively big deal in the industry, is data sovereignty. And cloud providers typically do not control your data across borders. So what data sovereignty essentially is where does your data live? So that's also something, if you are communicating globally with partners or with remote users, you have to be careful that information that is supposed to stay in the United States stays in the United States, because chances are you would not be able to retrieve it from a different country due to their privacy law. So what can we do? Remove data privacy and confidential information through workflows, which we saw. They're fast, easy to use. If your IT allows, you can actually use the workflow product yourself. And what it will do is it'll remove the records or data privacy data, so you don't have to worry about it. We saw that it changes content type, and descriptor and verbiages can be sent to the database and prohibit download. And this basically ensures compliance, and it also eliminates the manual tagging, which is, I don't know if you all agree, but it's usually pretty much prone to error. And what it does for the company is it actually reduces risk, protects your information, and ensures compliance and governance. Time, not all partners are created equal, and I think we can probably all agree that there's never enough time to get work done. For all of you that spend enormous amounts of time on emails, only 1/3 of emails are ever opened, compared to text messages, which are opened 98% of the time. So that means all of us who spend all kinds of time writing really nice emails, 2/3 of them are deleted. The problem is one truth. If you are asked to do it now by a colleague or a manager, the search engine doesn't typically function in real time, so you are most likely looking at old information. Also, you wouldn't be able to access related or interrelated content unless you had a collaboration tool, so you would be sharing information that is essentially stale. Time, what's the solution? There is no solution to no time left. I wish I had it because I could bottle it. What you want to be looking for is a solution that aggregates information regardless of where it's stored or what format it's in. And that should be real-time information. And there should also be no switching between applications to find things. So you should have one search interface that links multiple diverse or even siloed repositories together. So when you are using a collaboration tool, you actually see all information, because if you don't see all information, then you're more likely to make a bad decision. So it also, if we look at the demo from Mike, it also brings back information that you probably didn't even know exists. Process, I bet I've heard a million times, but we've always done it this way. People don't like change. And what's the situation? It's pretty much of a hornet's nest, and it ends up being everyone versus everyone. Processes can't be changed unless there's people involved. Most people don't want to change, yet a process that has potentially been used for 20 years probably needs some adjustment. And people that are impacted the most are, of course, the end users and the knowledge workers, because they're the ones that have to execute old processes. So the problem is information isn't shared, no collaboration on how to do it better, and people making a mountain out of a molehill that they don't want to change. But processes can be changed for the better, and an organization shouldn't be throwing up their hands and saying, but we've always done it this way. The solution involves 3 different groups, and it does take, as I said, a lot of human interaction. The technical side to validate the solution, the knowledge worker to actually define what the new process should be, because they actually know best, and management simply to approve the new process. Communication is a big area of errors and risk in collaboration. Obviously, it's a key element in getting things done. People have to communicate effectively. Managers who assume employees know how to complete a task, and those who fail to provide clear instructions ultimately decrease department productivity. HR Magazine reported that in a survey of 4,000 employees, 46% said they routinely receive confusing or unclear directions, and 36% of these employees reporting it happened up to 3 times each day. Participants in the study estimated they wasted about 40 minutes of productivity each day trying to interpret unclear or confusing directions. So obviously the result of that would lead to errors, increased risk, and actually poor decision making. The stat that was interesting is one study revealed that 18% of sickness and absence rates across the company was due to variations in communication practices. So it actually makes people physically ill when they're not communicated to in an effective way. So what's the solution? This is a tough one because you're dealing with how people speak or email or how they get ideas across. One of the problems that you'll run into, which goes back to conflict within a collaboration group, is the naysayer. And probably some of you have run into a naysayer, and the naysayer simply says, no, you can't do it that way. And if I say the sun is yellow, they'll say the sun is green. Those types of interactions when you're communicating in a group, the naysayer, one person, can bring the whole entire group down. So one of you in the group has to be effective at conflict resolution and essentially working your way around the naysayer. Or your other option would be go to your manager, who probably wouldn't be too pleased if the group wasn't able to handle one person. So those are your 2 options. Technology resources. this is a big risk challenge. Most IT departments are swamped. Of course, we all are swamped too, but the majority of organizations don't live in the perfect world. Few, if any, companies are going to hand you a laptop, a pad, a cell phone when you are hired. In fact, 71% of businesses do not have mobile communications available, and 67% won't allow cell phones even though they approve them. So it's kind of a conundrum that cell phones probably are the way to go, and organizations should allow end users to use them, but it's not happening. And it also provides a market differentiator. A lot of your clients or customers, or even internally, would prefer a text message than an email when they're looking for support or for information. The problem, of course, goes back to IT support, that they have to be able to support all of these different technologies. So here's the problem. IT and management have to implement the policies on the use of newer equipment. The knowledge worker can maybe influence the decision, but ultimately it's really out of your hands. Probably a lot of you already use your cell phones at work, but that's a problem. You shouldn't be using your own cell phone to support business issues. The same goes for bring your own device, which is starting to wane and not be as popular as it was before, and bring your own application. There's a lot of companies that are not moving to the cloud because bring your own application is a significant problem, that everyone is loading personal applications as well as specific business applications that they like to use into the cloud, so IT doesn't really know anything about it. So what does all of this impact? It impacts eventually any application that uses metadata. So in all of these instances, there may be a time when you are collaborating with a business partner or internally, and you will be performing one of these little circles, such as research or knowledge management or the results of text analytics. And this slide and the following slide are basically for you to use if you need any ammunition for the justification of a collaboration tool. 37 billion is lost yearly due to employee misunderstandings and bad communication. 57% of projects fail, and 65% of workers spend 45% of a workday collaborating and communicating. There's all different kinds of numbers floating around. So McKinsey had said 35%, now they're saying 45%. So I'm not going to read the rest of them, but some of the information is pretty interesting, and as I said, can be used in the justification of a collaboration tool. This looks at it from a person point of view. So if I add up the number of minutes spent, which is really wasting time, it's 3.4 hours per day, which is a huge amount of time. I'm not sure that's accurate or not. So I took it at, what, $20 an hour, so it's about $50,000 per year. Now that doesn't take into consideration the amount of money that you're still going to spend, even if you have all the right tools in the world. So again, this is something you can use for the justification of a collaboration tool. And what can we take away from this? Solutions have to be driven by upper management, such as in the case of the cell phone. the solutions have to be embraced by the knowledge workers, because if you all don't want to use it, you're not going to use it, and it's going to make the tool useless. Connectivity, more organizations have to take the step to connect remote people or people who are on the road. You will need one or more social collaboration tool probably within your organization, or at least one. Some of them we saw were actually intranets. Training and customization, which is usually overlooked and nobody gets training or customization. ROI tracking to actually find out, yeah, the user started to use it and after a month or two they quit using it. So, you know, why and where did that money go? Adoption of technology for the IT department, and that's phone and tablets and whatever else comes down the road. They have to get into our century and start using some new technologies. And the management of security issues. Security issues are growing. You know, part of the reluctance for cell phones is cell phones are not secure, and that's a growing problem. Even the phone isn't secure, let alone the applications. So that is all from me. Our next expert webinar is Enterprise Content Management versus Content Lifecycle Management, a fight to the finish on our upcoming webinars. If that is of interest to you, you can sign up for it. And finally, I do want to thank you. We will send you a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to us and we will get back to you. Thanks a lot.